All right, welcome to the Mountain Home Study Sage Family Edition.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're excited about this. My name is Samuel Goulet. This is Ashley Martinez.
Hello.
And my sister, Isabelle Parker.
Hello.
They're both professionally trained counselors and wonderful human beings.
True story.
True story. And all of our effort today will be to partner with you in your journey. And in the 10 episodes, we'll cover topics of marriage, raising kids, crisis, and many, many different things. We're excited to do it.
Yep.
And our first topic today are the marriage killers.
Absolutely.
And there are 4 of them.
Yeah.
For your marriage, they call it the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And so there's 4 that he
Because they
studied and
represent
researched.
doomsday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Basically, what he did is he did a research and a study that tried to find indicators of what causes divorce. And believe it or not, it's not sex, it's not money, it's not the type of things people think it is. It's actually these 4 things that we're going to talk about in the next 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Really cool. And the first 2 are?
Criticism and defensiveness.
Ooh.
Yes.
I don't have any of those.
No, never. Right?
See me being defensive right out of the gate.
It's not me, it's you.
That's right.
Yeah, actually, so the first one is criticism. And what's really important, because people will say, oh, I can't tell my spouse then that something is wrong in the marriage, or I want something different. And that's not what criticism is. Criticism attacks the person and who they are, their character. So instead of saying, hey, I have a complaint. So what we want is complaints versus criticism. I have a complaint. I need you to take out the trash. Or I've noticed the trash hasn't been taken out.
Yeah.
They're going to say, you're lazy. What's wrong with you? You didn't take out the trash.
Another thing that I've seen with criticism is you use a lot of blanket statements as like, you always do this, or you never meet this need for me. And as soon as you throw out a blanket statement, people will withdraw because they feel attacked.
100%.
So back to what she says, addressing the complaint, or sometimes when you don't do this for me, I feel this way. They can take that and not see it as they're a failure in a sense when you throw out those blanket statements.
Yes, so criticism can get really ugly in a marriage.
So being specific, well, what causes somebody to go from identifying just that behavior or maybe a pattern to assaulting and insulting the person?
Well, a lot of times people aren't taught how to communicate. So they've been modeled growing up, or they have experienced that from their spouse back, that this is how we communicate about these issues. So sometimes it doesn't even go from like, oh, I was communicating nicely to this. It was simply, we got married, and my way of expressing disdain or a complaint about taking out the trash is to go after your character.
Yeah.
We think, oh, that's going to motivate our spouse to do this.
Interesting.
Or we're angry and we get flooded. So research shows that oftentimes our brain gets flooded. And when our brain gets flooded, we say things we don't really mean. And it like hijacks our brain, we call it.
Yeah.
And so they go right to criticism. So it can happen in the very beginning of a marriage. It can happen dating. It can happen late in a marriage. So it really isn't always just a buildup. I think it's sometimes how we were taught to communicate.
Yeah.
Interesting. So a lot of it is tied to somebody's actual desire for productivity and changing somebody or partnering in their growth.
Or trying to communicate even.
And it's just a really broken way to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
That causes more damage in the long run and short term probably.
Yeah.
100%. Well, because what happens is the person that's being criticized will take that, and it'll create a lower self-esteem for them. Not that we're responsible for our spouse's self-esteem entirely, but we can definitely contribute to it strengthening, or we can contribute to it weakening. And when you're constantly being criticized, so it tears you down.
Yeah.
So you'll see in really abusive relationships, even if there's no physical abuse, a lot of verbal abuse comes in the way of criticism.
Yeah.
Attacking who the person is.
It's interesting because a lot of these topics end up feeling like they're in the world of counseling.
Yep.
And the reason we're doing this to help people grow is because I, as a pastor, wanted to partner really mentally healthy and emotionally healthy concepts to a spiritual journey of growing with God, because a lot of times they're seen as 2 different worlds.
Yeah.
And when, in all of my experience of studying, I have my bachelor's in psychology, not like you guys with your master's and all your fancy degrees. No, but I in all of my studies of both the Word and spiritual realities and emotional and mental health and wholeness, is that they're completely in harmony.
Yeah.
And that if you're doing it in a really rooted way, like even in Proverbs 15:1, it talks about the gentle answer turns away wrath.
Right.
And you look at these concepts of not just repairing broken marriages, but honestly improving and helping heal in sometimes it's big ways, sometimes it's small ways. And these are things in my marriage. I'm 10 years now. Just like a week or two ago, we celebrated that and have our 4th kid. And that, and you'd have to ask my wife for sure, so you can email her. But we have a good marriage, and we've had to work on these things, though, and say, okay, wow, I've noticed I'm become defensive.
Right. So that's the next one is I find that defensiveness usually does come progressively with a lot of criticism.
Yeah.
So when I haven't been told like, hey, I need help taking out the trash, this is important to me. Or, hey, I need you to help me with the kids, I'm exhausted and tired, right? If I'm not communicating that way, I'm saying, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you helping me with the kids? You're a terrible father. I'm not going to get a good response from my spouse. I'm going to get defensiveness. No, I'm not, because they're trying to protect themselves. So even defensiveness often comes from a place of trying to protect ourselves.
Interesting.
And so from both the person receiving defensiveness and the person giving out the defense, I always say there's something different that you can do. So if I realize my spouse is being defensive, I can either defend back, right? So that's usually what ends up happening. Or I can go, okay, what just happened? So, some in the way that I just communicated something that triggered my spouse to be defensive. So then maybe I'm going to reword my criticism. Maybe I'm going to reword it to a complaint, right? So oftentimes those are progressive. And then I say to the person, so that's the person delivering it. But the person getting the defensiveness, sometimes or being defensive, you have to realize, like, what is my spouse trying to say? We have to be willing to grow, and all of us own a part in our marriage. And all of us own a part in that cycle. So what can I do different? Maybe my spouse is saying it wrong, but let me try to really get to the point of what can I do different in this cycle to improve our marriage.
Reinterpret it.
It sounds really like it's a lot of like relearning behaviors, because if you even look at your childhood or marriages that were modeled to you, if you've seen criticism, if you learn, so it's almost like they're almost coping skills, even though they have negative effects to them, right? And I think that's important too, because we are relearning. Like, how do I respond to criticism if that's all I've known my whole life? And now I have a partner who I love, but what do I do? And anger, frustration, all that starts to come in. So I do think it's a lot of relearning, a lot of reapplying, and kind of self-awareness, I think, is huge when it comes to this stuff. Because if we're not self-aware, we can't see what our husband is trying to tell us or what's going on in our relationship.
That's
or
powerful.
what our wife is trying to tell us.
So I think seeing the issues and recognizing and being really honest with ourselves and anybody watching to go, okay, I recognize there's patterns of being critical and being defensive in my relationship, my marriage. You can even identify these in dating and engagement, and asking yourself, one, how can I see the heart of what they're saying or reinterpret? And two, how can I retrain my mind, create new patterns of language? And I think those would be two really helpful dynamics to identify. As not just understanding the issue, but creating new behaviors, new patterns, and growing. Because even in reinterpreting or creating new language, I've noticed that at first it's very foreign. When I first start telling somebody that I'm in a relationship with, discipling a guy or whatever, hey man, I really love you. Sometimes for a guy that has no experience of hearing that, that's like, all right, man, see you later, bro. And he completely doesn't know how to receive or to give, communicate love, and that language is very foreign.
For sure, and it's uncomfortable. I think that's the key. It is uncomfortable at times, and you have to learn to push through that uncomfort to see some of the positive things that can come from dealing with things in a healthy manner. But it's hard. I mean,
I have clients all the time say, that can't be right. It feels so weird. And I'm like, but what you've done has hurt your relationship so much, or hurt your life even so much. Do you want to keep doing what feels normal, which has been dysfunctional for you? Or do you want to try something that feels foreign and trust that it may create different patterns in your relationship?
This is so good. Okay, so reinterpret, find new patterns of communication that are really healthy. Gottman's got some great ones.
And we'll talk about them in further episodes. But today, for me, number one is realizing when we're critical and realizing when we're defensive, right? And why, and how can we do that different? So that's a really important part for me is really identifying, because criticism comes in judgment, and people say I'm not being critical, and it's like, you know, it's very heavy in criticism. And I will tell you, the couples that are in the most chaos in my room are usually dealing with these 4 horsemen.
These 4 horsemen.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So identify these areas, and in the next episode, we'll identify the last 2 horsemen of the apocalypse of marriage. See you on the next episode.